So this video is going to be about astrology and why it is highly likely that what we've been taught, what we've been sold, and probably what we think about astrology is really incorrect and has thus led us into a cul-de-sac, meaning this circular dead end within other circular dead ends within a whole web of dead ends that we're kind of stuck in, and we never really seem to progress beyond or outside of that. In the way people tend to understand things like astrology is basically this idea, oh, well, somehow the planets or the stars above me are affecting my life, controlling good luck or bad luck, or if I'm this way or that way. And it's kind of a whole, some sense of a mechanical, deterministic worldview, like, oh, well, this is just, it's written in the stars, so to speak, and that's just what it is. And one thing that people really, especially like New Agey and hippie people, love this whole Mercury retrograde thing. And it's, again, a similar idea. And this video is based on a comment that I received, which basically says that, do you think you could share your thoughts regarding astrology? And talking about the sense of fatalism versus free will. So I first want to share a quote from Nietzsche, the famous philosopher. And he basically said that if you look up and see the stars as something above and separate from you, then you lack the eye of knowledge. Likewise, on another note, Jesus said that if you have gained this within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have this in you, what you do not have in you will kill you. Now, a lot of the ideas that I'm going to be sharing are based on my own experience and referencing the article and works of other people, which I'll be linking below if you want to pursue this more deeply or dig into it a bit more deeply and broaden your horizon. So really there's the common view which we've just talked about, and if we listen to these two quotes, there's yet another idea that we're sort of looking at. And it could be leading us to an examination of the psyche, an examination of the processes and fluctuations and cycles in the psyche. And perhaps the ancient axiom of know thyself, and the other axiom that is as above, so below, as within, so without, and these kinds of, microcosmic and macrocosmic ideas. And to switch gears a little bit, we can look at the whole idea of causality. And because free will and determinism are supposedly two contradicting things, and causality and randomness are, within that, they're basic assumptions that those things are based on. But if the idea of causality were thrown out, then how could we even have a conversation about free will or determinism? So the philosopher David Hume has a lot to say about causation, and if you want to read about that, just Google David Hume and causation. You can see how he pretty much debunked and negated the whole idea of causation, which so much of our science is based on. But something that's closer to me would be Taoist philosophy, Taoist ideas, or we could even look at the quantum universe and understandings of quantum mechanics. And that basically the closer down to reality we get, the more kind of almost random it seems. Meaning up here on a macro level, you might be able to say, well, if I hit this ball, then it might hit this ball and do this and that. But really, once we get down further close to the subatomic realm, it starts to become a bit more iffy. Then we have the wave-particle duality. Is light a wave or is light a particle? And there are experiments that can prove that it's both. But which is it? It's kind of like, well, free will or determinism, which is it? Observer or observed, which is it? It's kind of like, well, you can you can make an experiment and prove both to be true and prove both to be false. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us something deeper, which I'm not really going to say, but just leave for further examination. So in sort of Taoist philosophy, there's the idea of Zitron, which I don't really know the tones too well, but it's Zirren, which is basically the idea of things being spontaneous or things being of themselves, whatever. Your heart beats, a plant grows. What is the cause of a plant growing? Which part of the plant causes it to grow? We can ask all these questions. We can really break things down. We could say, oh, well, this caused this, and they're separate, but in actuality, the effect is the same process of the cause, just continuing on, and that cause is an effect of other things, and we could really take it on for the end of time until we eventually realize, like, wow, this is really a pretty interconnected web, and we can't necessarily find a separate place. So again, that whole conversation could be an even deeper exploration, but from these actually three different angles, from sort of Western philosophy, from Eastern philosophy, and even from quantum mechanics and the whole holographic universe type of theory, the idea of causation and the idea of free will and determinism kind of falls apart. And then we look at the quotes that we said earlier, which are basically more ancient mystical kind of things or Gnostic understandings. Even again, they're basically saying a similar idea. So then when we come back to this thing of astrology, and oh, I'm this way because of this, and this is going to happen, da 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 da, it sort of brings things under a new type of lens. So to sort of wrap it up, what we could understand is that maybe astrology is a divinatory art that when we again look outside and think it's separate than us, we lack the eye of understanding. We lack the eye of wisdom and knowledge. But when we understand and look back and realize that perhaps it's a mirror of our minds or a mirror of our psyche or our unconscious, whatever you want to call it, then perhaps then we can have the eye of wisdom or the eye of understanding. In the same way that we may use the I Ching, or we may use the Tarot, or may use Kabbalah, or may use many different things, which in and of themselves not necessarily having so much meaning, but the meaning that we give it, the meaning that it can reveal to us. Because a lot of people think the unconscious is some deep, dark, mysterious, murky place. Will we ever get there? What will it be like? Perhaps it could just be a way of seeing, could be a way of looking at things, a mode of perception, and that these different kinds of systems can be a mirror for that and allow us to get in touch with that and allow us to get a pulse or a thread for the living dynamic that we are part and parcel of. We're not separate from it. We're not colliding with it. We're not necessarily at cause, or at fault of it, but it's something altogether a bit more complex and harder to really put into words. And we could spend literally a long time breaking this apart. And fortunately, many other people have already done that. People for a few thousand years have been really breaking down this idea. But again, we're just brought up in this world that teaches us, oh, object and observer are separate. Subject and object are separate. Self and other are separate. All these different things, they're separate. And then people have been wasting their lives for a long time trying to resolve these, well, I just don't understand. Or the whole idea of, things are one, okay, but what about feeling separate? I can't feel separate. I have to feel at one. Realizing that perhaps the feeling of separation is the same thing as the feeling of oneness. And that if certain truths are, then we don't necessarily have to do anything for them. And the actual doing takes us further away, or it really clouds our perception. And it leads us back to another quote which sort of really sets the tone and sums up what I'm trying to get at here. And it's basically, a lot of people chase after, new experiences. I gotta travel, I gotta go here, I gotta see this, I gotta see that, I gotta, constantly, evolve the physical plane and do this and that, which there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But the real thing is that perhaps it's not the external world which needs to be constantly made fresh, but perhaps our perception, perhaps our mode of seeing and our or lack thereof. Perhaps that is what needs to be worked on or cleansed or detoxified or made new or made fresh or kept fresh, which we look at Zen, we have the whole idea of the beginner's mind, the empty mind or the mind like a mirror, or all these different ways of trying to describe and get at this type of idea. And an even deeper concept is also the whole thing about meaning and purpose. And we're also taught that these are like separate things. We have words which in and of themselves are kind of nothing, but they refer to something, hopefully. And what the thing refers to is the meaning, and that's usually something in the physical world. But what is the meaning of that? What is the purpose of that? It's like, what is the purpose of a dance? What is the meaning of a dance? What is the purpose of a song? What is the meaning of a song? What is the purpose of a color? What is the meaning of a color? I mean, it could be nothing. It could be everything. And really, what does it mean to us? How do we relate to it? And that can sort of lead us to understanding these different arts, whether it's astrology or I Ching or whatever, in different ways, because, and I don't really want to lump the I Ching in with astrology, because I personally feel like it's really annoying when people do that, because they're like, oh, it's all divinatory arts, they're just all the same. All religions are just all the same. All spiritual traditions are just all the same. And yeah, if you don't really look, if you don't really, dig deep, and yeah, there are similarities, but there's very distinct differences as well. So I'm only doing it for just convenience, but also fully admitting that it's inherently incorrect in a lot of ways as well. But the main point is understanding these things work on the whole brain. It's not just the left brain, this little minute portion of conscious awareness, which is just scanning the environment and trying to problem solve, and what's the profit in this? Basically just this mindset that's continually conditioned to just always seek profit from everything, and it can't really do anything other than just profit, produce, improve, always, which has its use for sure. And the other, we have our right brain, we have our bigger awareness, whatever you want to call it, and that responds more to symbolism, to images, to colors, to sounds, to vibrations, to frequencies, to all these different things. Much like music and different arts work on the whole brain. And in that way they can be magical, in that way they can be transcendental, because they're sort of opening a door to the unconscious. Well, what is that? Well, it could be anything that we're not conscious of. It could be anything that we're not really aware of or is outside of our awareness. So what does that even mean? Again, could be a deeper thing. So I'm hopefully what I've done is start to paint a little bit of a picture, and not necessarily provide distinct, clear answers for your left brain. Well, what is it? Just define it for me. It's not really the point. Hopefully, I've tried to just point to things and suggest and introduce tones and some colors and some frequencies and some ways of seeing things that can perhaps lead to questions or create questions that open doors necessarily. Because sometimes it's not really about the answer, but it's about the act of questioning and that process. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But anyways, hopefully this has made sense and has been helpful, and maybe shifted your idea of astrology a little bit more. And I guess the main idea is understanding that pretty much it's safe to assume that most of what we're told about anything is probably not that accurate most of the time, because especially when we're dealing with things that are esoteric or occult, they can be really powerful. They can be, incredibly transformative. For that reason, anytime there's power, there's also responsibility. It's not necessarily a weird thing. I mean, if you're going to drive a car, you have to go through a certain process and understand certain things and prove a certain amount of understanding and responsibility to be able to, hold that power. Same thing with, owning a gun or any other type of aspect of our life which, brings with it power. And even in the past, even in ancient times, it's not like this stuff was just out there like it is today. It wasn't just out there for everyone. Typically there was a process. There were rites of passage that were people had to go through. They had to die to be reborn. And this is a mythology that we can see in myths and movies and books throughout all of history. The hero starts off humble, then he goes on the quest, then has an experience of dying or being broken down, and then receives, teaching or training or a higher level of understanding, and then breaks through and becomes something far greater. But in our modern times, we just want to pick up our phone and be like, press a few buttons and then be like, oh wow, I just learned the secrets of this ancient tradition. Oh, and then we want to like pretend that that's necessarily the same depth of understanding as someone who's really invested a lot of time and energy in actually living it and eating it, because there's two different things to talk about something, and then one is actually living it. Because once we actually have the thing, oftentimes we can forget about the tool because we understand the deeper process. It's kind of like the Taoist philosopher Shuangzi said something about, once you've gotten the meaning, you can do away with words. And then he basically said, like, where can I find a man who's gotten this so I can have a word with him? So, yeah. But again, I'm going to link to the article by Michael Tessarian, which is called The Inner Zodiac, which really opened my eyes to a lot of this stuff and breaks down a lot of stuff. And I took some quotes directly from the article, and I would highly recommend reading it over if you're interested in astrology or any like Western esoteric kind of traditions like numerology or Kabbalah. Because really, in his perspective, tarot, astrology, Kabbalah, and numerology are all kind of sisters and all really go together. And they shouldn't necessarily be studied separately. Which I align with that to a large degree, because in my experience with studying different sort of Chinese arts, I've seen people that study a lot of disciplines and then kind of what they do, and then I've seen people that just fixate on one little area, one little piece, and I've seen kind of what they do as well. And I think in ancient times and past times, people would study the whole thing, because when we're, at least in Chinese type of understanding, regardless if it's medicine, martial arts, music, the underlying philosophy is basically the same. It's yin-yang, it's 5 elements, it's, the 8 trigrams, it's the same cosmological, philosophical system is underlying it. So these different ways are different ways of working with that and interfacing with that level of consciousness. So I haven't done enough work or research on the Western traditions, but I would probably assume and wager that it's a similar idea, that there's an underlying current or belief system, and these are just different ways of looking at it, which, if you look at everything I've just said in this video, there's a large emphasis being placed on the psyche. If you look at the work of Carl Jung, it's obviously looking at the psyche and the state of the psyche and the consciousness and these different things, and so there you have it. So again, check out the link below if you want to learn more about this. Highly recommend it. It'll probably open your mind to some things that you probably hadn't considered previously. Anyways, thanks for watching this video, and subscribe to my channel, post a comment to the video, share it with people that you like, and I'll talk to you soon.